The coffee machine sputtered its last drops into my chipped mug, the familiar sound marking another morning in the life I'd built from nothing. 10 years. 10 years since I'd learned that strength wasn't something you were born with. It was something you earned in the quiet moments when giving up would have been easier than breathing. My hands wrapped around the warmth of the ceramic, and I stared out the small kitchen window of our second-floor apartment. The October sun was trying to break through the gray clouds, casting long shadows across the street below. It reminded me of other autumns, other mornings when the world had seemed full of possibility instead of responsibility. "Mom, I can't find my science project." Ethan's voice carried from his bedroom, followed by the sound of drawers being yanked open with the particular chaos only a 10-year-old could create. "Did you check under your bed?" I called back, already moving toward his room, my bare feet patting against the worn linoleum that I kept telling myself I'd replace someday when money wasn't so tight. I found him exactly where I expected. On his knees, half his body disappeared under the bed frame, his dark hair sticking up in the same stubborn cowlick that no amount of gel could tame. The cowlick that matched his father's perfectly, though Ethan had never met the man whose genes had shaped the strong line of his jaw and the intensity in his brown eyes. "Got it!" He emerged triumphantly, clutching a poster board covered in diagrams about the solar system. Somehow, he'd managed to get marker on his cheek in the 3 minutes since I'd last checked on him. "Come here, baby," I said, licking my thumb to wipe away the mark. He squirmed away with the particular indignation of a boy who considered himself too old for such maternal ministrations. "Mom, I'm not a baby. I'm 10. "You'll always be my baby," I countered, managing to catch him for a quick hug before he dodged away entirely. "Even when you're 40 and have babies of your own." He made a face that suggested having children of his own was only slightly less horrifying than having cooties, then grabbed his backpack from the floor. "Can we get McDonald's for dinner tonight? Tommy's mom takes him every Friday." "We'll see," I said, the universal parent response that meant, probably not, but I don't want to disappoint you right now. Money was tight this month, tighter than usual after the car needed new brakes, and the electricity bill had been higher than expected. But seeing the hope in his eyes, I added, "Maybe we can make our own burgers at home, just as good, and we can watch a movie." His face lit up with genuine excitement, and my heart clenched with the familiar mixture of love and guilt that had been my constant companion since the day I'd realized I was pregnant at 19. Guilt that I couldn't give him everything. Guilt that he'd never known his father. Guilt that sometimes, late at night when exhaustion made my defenses weak, I still thought about the man who'd left us. The man I'd loved with the desperate, all-consuming intensity that only first love could inspire. The man whose absence had nearly destroyed me before I'd learned to rebuild myself, stronger and harder than before. "Go brush your teeth," I instructed, checking the time on the microwave. "Bus comes in 15 minutes. I returned to the kitchen to pack his lunch, the same thing every day because it was cheap and he actually ate it. Peanut butter and jelly, an apple, a handful of chips I'd portioned from a family-size bag. Nothing fancy, but it was made with love, and that had to count for something. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Sarah, my manager at the diner where I worked most days. "Need you to cover a double today if you can. Karen called in sick. We'll pay time and a half." I stared at the message, calculating rapidly. A double meant 14 hours on my feet, meant missing the parent-teacher conference I'd been looking forward to, meant Ethan would have to go to Mrs. Chen's after school instead of me being there when the bus dropped him off. But time and a half also meant I could probably swing that McDonald's dinner he wanted. Maybe even put a little extra in the emergency fund I kept hidden in an envelope taped under my nightstand. "I'll be there," I typed back, then added Ethan's lunch to his backpack, and forced a smile as he bounded back into the kitchen, teeth brushed and face mostly clean. "Ready, champ?" "Ready." He grabbed his backpack with both hands, staggering slightly under its weight. I made a mental note to check how many books his teacher was assigning. 10-year-olds shouldn't need to carry 20 pounds to school every day. I walked him to the bus stop 3 blocks away, the same route we took every morning. The neighborhood wasn't the worst in the city, but it wasn't the best either. Chain-link fences, graffiti that got painted over and reappeared within weeks, the constant sound of sirens that I'd learned to tune out. But the rent was manageable. The neighbors mostly kept to themselves, and Mrs. Chen was good about watching Ethan for affordable rates. It was enough. It had to be enough. The bus rumbled up right on time, and Ethan climbed the stairs with the confidence of a kid who'd been riding the same route for 3 years. He turned at the top to wave, and I waved back, watching until the bus turned the corner before I allowed myself to check the time. I had 45 minutes to shower, change, and catch the subway to the diner. Not enough time, but it never was. The shift at the diner started at 7 and didn't let up until well past noon. Friday lunch rush meant every booth filled with office workers and construction crews, everyone wanting their food fast and their coffee constantly refilled. My feet ached in the sensible shoes I'd bought at a discount store, and my lower back had that familiar throb that came from hours of carrying heavy trays. But I smiled at every customer, refilled every cup, cleared every table with efficiency born from years of practice. I'd been working here since Ethan was 3, back when Sarah had taken a chance on a single mom with no experience, and a reference letter from a community college professor who'd believed in me. "Table 6 needs water," Sarah called from behind the counter, and I grabbed a pitcher, navigating through the crowded space with practiced ease. Table 6 was tucked in the back corner, partially hidden by the divider that separated the main dining area from the smaller, quieter section we reserved for customers who wanted privacy. I was already reciting my greeting in my head, friendly but efficient, professional but warm, when I rounded the divider and looked up. The pitcher slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. Water exploded across the floor in a cascade that seemed to happen in slow motion, each drop catching the overhead lights and scattering them like shattered glass. But I barely registered the mess, barely heard Sarah's exclamation of surprise, barely felt the cold water soaking through my shoes. Because sitting at table 6, looking up at me with eyes I'd memorized in dreams I pretended not to remember, was John. 10 years hadn't softened him. If anything, they'd honed him into something harder, more dangerous. His dark hair was shorter now, styled with expensive precision. His jaw was sharper, shadowed with the kind of stubble that looked deliberately maintained. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, the fabric draping across shoulders that had broadened since I'd last traced them with trembling 19-year-old fingers. But his eyes, those dark, intense eyes that had once looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered, they were the same, and they were staring at me with the same shock that was surely written across my own face. "Elena," he said, my name emerging rough and disbelieving, like he'd thought he'd never say it again. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there in a puddle of water, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my temples, in every nerve ending that had suddenly come alive after a decade of forced dormancy. He stood slowly, and I noticed 2 things simultaneously. First, he wasn't alone. 2 men in equally expensive suits flanked him, their postures screaming security or muscle or both. Second, he'd gotten taller somehow. Or maybe I'd just forgotten how his presence could fill a space, could consume all the oxygen until there was nothing left but him. "Elena," he said again, taking a step toward me, and the sound of my name in his mouth after 10 years of silence broke whatever paralysis had held me frozen. "I need to clean this up," I said, the words emerging shakier than I wanted, and bent to start gathering the pieces of the shattered pitcher with hands that trembled visibly. He moved faster than I expected, crouching beside me. "Don't. You'll cut yourself." "I'm fine," I said, jerking away from his proximity, from the scent of expensive cologne that was nothing like the cheap drugstore body spray he'd worn when we were young, but somehow still fundamentally him underneath. "I can handle broken glass. I've been handling everything just fine for 10 years. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, edged with all the anger and hurt and longing I'd thought I'd buried. His hand stilled, hovering in the air between us, and something flashed across his face. Pain, regret, guilt, all there and gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. Elena, he started. But Sarah appeared with a mop and bucket, her eyes sharp as they assessed the situation. I got this, she said, her tone brooking no argument. She looked at John, at his expensive suit and the way he was staring at me, and something calculating entered her expression. Your table will be ready in just a moment, sir. Elena, why don't you take your break? You've been on your feet for hours. I don't need a break, I protested. But Sarah was already steering me toward the back room, her hand firm on my elbow. Take 15 minutes, she said quietly when we were out of earshot. Whoever that man is, you need to collect yourself before you go back out there. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I had. Maybe John was a ghost, the ghost of everything I'd lost, everything I'd survived, everything I'd become in his absence. I locked myself in the tiny employee bathroom and stared at my reflection in the age-spotted mirror. I looked exactly like what I was, a 30-year-old single mother working a double shift at a diner, hair pulled back in a functional ponytail, minimal makeup, because who had time for that? My uniform slightly damp from the spilled water. Nothing like the 19-year-old girl who'd believed in fairy tales and forever. Nothing like the girl who'd loved John with every fiber of her being, who'd given him everything, who'd believed his promises even when common sense said she shouldn't. That girl was gone. I'd killed her myself when John disappeared, when the pregnancy test showed positive, when reality crashed down with the weight of impossibility. But apparently, John was very much alive. I gave myself exactly 3 minutes to fall apart in that bathroom. 3 minutes to let my hands shake, to let my breath come in gasps, to let the tears I'd refused to shed for a decade prick at my eyes without permission. 3 minutes to be that 19-year-old girl again, the one who'd woken up to an empty bed and a note that said nothing except, I'm sorry. Then I splashed cold water on my face, straightened my uniform, and became Elena Russo again. The woman who'd raised a child alone. The woman who'd put herself through community college one night class at a time. The woman who'd learned that survival wasn't pretty, but it was powerful. When I emerged, Sarah was waiting with a knowing look. You don't have to go back out there. I can have Jessica cover your section. I'm fine, I said, and this time my voice was steady. It's just an old friend. Friend, Sarah repeated, skepticism dripping from the word. That man looked at you like... She stopped, shook her head. Just be careful, Elena. Men in suits that expensive don't usually end up in diners like ours unless they're slumming or looking for something. I nodded, not trusting myself to explain that John had once worn thrift store jeans and worked 2 jobs to afford textbooks. That the boy I'd known had dreams of being a teacher, of making a difference, of building a quiet life far from whatever shadows he'd been running from. But the man sitting at table 6 wasn't that boy anymore. I grabbed a fresh pitcher of water and a towel, squared my shoulders, and walked back into the dining room. John was back in his seat, but his attention was locked on the doorway, like he'd been waiting, watching for me. His 2 companions had their backs to me, but as I approached, one of them, a massive man with shoulders like a linebacker, turned slightly. His eyes swept over me with professional assessment, cataloging, evaluating, dismissing. I wasn't a threat, just a waitress. Gentlemen, I said, my voice crisp and professional, as I filled their water glasses without spilling a drop. Can I start you with drinks? Scotch, John said, his voice rough. Neat. We don't serve alcohol, I replied, meeting his eyes with deliberate steadiness. This is a family diner. Coffee, soda, juice, or water. Those are your options. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. The John I'd known would have laughed at my tone, would have teased me about being bossy. This John just nodded slowly. Coffee. Black. Same, the linebacker said. His voice was surprisingly cultured, at odds with his brutal appearance. The third man, smaller but with eyes that never stopped moving, assessing every exit, every potential threat, just shook his head. Water's fine. I took their food orders efficiently, mechanically, and retreated to the kitchen to put in their tickets. My hands only shook a little as I poured coffee, added cream to the linebackers despite him saying black, a small rebellion against the man who'd brought John back into my orbit. When I returned with their drinks, John's hand shot out and caught my wrist. Not hard, not threatening, but the touch sent electricity shooting up my arm like I'd been struck by lightning. Elena, he said quietly, his thumb pressed against my pulse point where my heart was hammering traitorously. We need to talk. No, we don't. I pulled my hand free, stepped back. Your order will be up in 10 minutes. Please. The word seemed to cost him something. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. You don't get to ask me for anything. The words came out harder than I'd intended, loud enough that Sarah looked over from the register with concern. I lowered my voice, leaned in so only he could hear. You gave up that right 10 years ago when you walked away without a word, without an explanation, without a backward glance. I looked back. His voice was barely audible, raw with an emotion I wouldn't name. Every day for 10 years, I looked back. Then you have excellent peripheral vision, I said flatly, because you never once turned around. I walked away before he could respond, before the anger and hurt could crack the armor I'd spent a decade building, before I could do something foolish like cry or scream or ask him the 1,000 questions that had haunted me through sleepless nights and lonely mornings. The rest of their meal passed in tense silence. I served their food with professional efficiency, refilled their coffee without comment, left the check without lingering. John tried twice more to engage me in conversation, but I shut him down each time with practiced ease. I'd gotten very good at shutting people out. Elena, Table 6 wants to see you, Jessica said as I was clearing dishes from another booth. The boss man asked for you specifically. Of course he did. I found John alone. His companions had apparently stepped outside or to the restroom, and he was holding a business card between 2 fingers, extending it toward me like an offering. I don't want your card, I said, not taking it. I know. He set it on the table anyway, face up so I could see the heavy cardstock, the embossed lettering that read, John Castellano, CEO, Castellano Enterprises, with a phone number and an address in the financial district. But I'm giving it to you anyway, because I need you to call me. Today. Tonight. Whenever you're ready to hear what I have to say. There's nothing you can say that I want to hear. What if I told you I left to keep you safe? His voice dropped, urgent and intense. What if I told you that staying would have put you in danger I couldn't protect you from? That leaving was the only way to make sure you had a chance at a normal life. Then I'd say you're 10 years too late with your explanations. But something in my chest tightened, because I could hear the truth in his words, could see the weight of them in the set of his shoulders. And I'd say that I managed to build a perfectly good life without you. Have you? His eyes searched mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. Are you happy, Elena? Are you safe? Are you... He stopped abruptly, like he'd been about to ask something else but thought better of it. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened instantly, transforming from the man trying desperately to explain himself into something colder, more dangerous. I have to go. He stood, pulling out his wallet and dropping several $100 bills on the table, far more than their meal cost. But this isn't over. I'll find you again. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. I don't want to be found. I don't want you in my life. I don't want... My voice cracked traitorously. I don't want to go through losing you again. Something devastated crossed his face, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. You never lost me, Elena. I've been yours every day for 10 years. I just couldn't let you be mine because of what I am, what I'd become. He paused at the edge of the table. But things have changed. I've changed. And I'm not walking away again. Not without making sure you're protected. Protected from what? From everything. His jaw tightened. From the world I live in. From the enemies I've made. From the consequences of decisions I made when I was too young and too stupid to understand what they would cost me. The linebacker appeared at his elbow, murmuring something too low for me to hear. John nodded once, then looked back at me. Keep the card, please. And Elena... He hesitated, something vulnerable flickering in those dark eyes. Tell me you're happy. Tell me the last 10 years have been good to you. Tell me I made the right choice by leaving. Give me that at least. I could have lied. Should have lied. But the words that came out were honest in a way that made me hate myself a little. Some days were good. Some days were hard. But I survived them all. That's more than you gave me the chance to do together. He flinched like I'd struck him. I'm sorry. God, Elena, I'm so sorry. If I could go back. But you can't. I picked up the money from the table, counted out enough to cover the meal plus a reasonable tip, and thrust the rest back at him. I don't need your guilt money, John. I don't need your apologies. I don't need anything from you except for you to stay away from me and let me live my life. I can't do that. His voice was quiet but absolute. Not anymore. Not now that I've seen you again. Not when... He stopped, glanced at his phone again, then at his companion. I have to go, but I'll be back. And next time, I'm not leaving until you hear me out. They were gone before I could formulate a response, the door chiming softly behind them. I stood there clutching the handful of $100 bills he'd forced into my hand, my heart racing and my thoughts spinning. Sarah materialized at my elbow. You okay? Fine, I lied. That man is nobody, I interrupted. Just a ghost from a past life. But as I pocketed the money, I wasn't proud enough to throw away cash that could buy Ethan new shoes and that McDonald's dinner. I couldn't shake the feeling that John wasn't a ghost at all. He was very much alive, and based on the expensive suit, the security detail, the casual way he'd thrown around money, and the dangerous edge that had replaced the gentle boy I'd known, he was something far more complicated than the man I'd once loved. The business card burned in my apron pocket all afternoon. I pulled it out a dozen times, read the embossed letters, traced the phone number with my finger, then shoved it back without calling. By the time my double shift ended at 9, my feet were screaming and my back was one long ache. I picked up Ethan from Mrs. Chen's, grateful that he'd already eaten and done his homework, and we rode the subway home in comfortable silence. He fell asleep against my shoulder, his dark hair, so like John's, tickling my cheek. I wrapped my arm around him and stared at our reflection in the subway window. This was my life. This beautiful, complicated, exhausting, precious life I'd built from nothing. Ethan was everything to me. My purpose, my joy, my reason for surviving when giving up would have been easier. And John could never know about him. The thought crystallized with sudden clarity. Because if John had become the kind of man who traveled with bodyguards and threw around money like it meant nothing, if he'd become someone dangerous enough to reference enemies and protection like they were everyday concerns, then he was exactly the kind of man I needed to keep away from my son. Our son. The son he didn't know existed. I'd told no one the truth. Not even Mrs. Chen, who'd watched Ethan since he was a baby. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 18, before John, before pregnancy, before everything. I had no siblings, few friends, no one who would have remembered the boy I'd dated briefly and intensely one summer between high school and college. Ethan thought his father was someone I'd dated casually, who'd moved away before I knew I was pregnant. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, vague enough to discourage questions, and it had kept him safe. But now John was back. And if he started digging into my life, asking questions, looking for proof that I'd moved on without him, he'd find Ethan. The subway screeched to our stop. I woke Ethan gently, guided him home, tucked him into bed, and stood in his doorway watching him sleep like I did every night. He had John's eyes, John's stubborn cowlick, John's habit of frowning slightly in his sleep like he was solving problems in his dreams. He was half John, half me, and wholly mine. And I would do anything, to keep him safe from the dangerous world his father had apparently become part of. Even if it meant facing John Castellano one more time and making absolutely certain he never discovered the truth. The business card haunted me for 3 days. I'd wake up at 2 a.m, my hand instinctively reaching for the nightstand where I'd left it, my fingers tracing the embossed letters in the darkness, like they could somehow decode the mystery of what John had become. Castellano Enterprises. Even the name sounded dangerous, powerful. Nothing like the boy who'd worked construction jobs to save money for college, who'd talked about teaching history to kids who needed someone to believe in them. On the 4th morning, I woke to find Ethan standing beside my bed, his dark eyes, John's eyes, wide with concern. "Mom, you were talking in your sleep again." I sat up, pushing my hair out of my face. "Sorry, baby. Did I wake you?" "You said someone's name." He tilted his head, curious rather than worried. "John. Who's John?" The name on my lips tasted like broken promises and lost futures. Just someone I used to know. Nobody important. You said it like it was important. He was too perceptive for 10, too good at reading the micro-expressions I thought I'd learned to hide. You sounded sad. I pulled him into a hug, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo. Everyone has people from their past, Ethan. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant everything. The universe apparently had a cruel sense of humor, because that afternoon, when I picked Ethan up from school, John was waiting outside the gates. My blood turned to ice. He was leaning against a black SUV that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years, his suit jacket open, his tie loosened, looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine that specialized in dangerous men who looked like they could kill you with their bare hands and make it look effortless. But it wasn't his presence that terrified me. It was the fact that he was watching the children pour out of the school, with an intensity that made my maternal instincts scream danger. I grabbed Ethan's hand harder than I meant to, pulling him close as we walked past the SUV, praying John wouldn't notice us, wouldn't see the dark-haired boy who had his eyes, his jawline, his stubborn expression. "Elena." His voice stopped me dead. Ethan looked up, confused by my sudden tension. "Mom?" "Keep walking," I murmured. But John was already moving, crossing the sidewalk in long strides that ate up the distance between us. "Elena, wait, please." I had no choice but to turn. My body positioned between John and Ethan in a protective stance that was purely instinctive. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you." His eyes dropped to Ethan, and I saw the exact moment curiosity turned to calculation. "And who is this?" "None of your business." My voice came out harder than I'd intended, and Ethan's hand tightened in mine, picking up on my fear even if he didn't understand it. John's gaze moved from Ethan to me and back again, and I could practically see the math happening behind those dark eyes. The boy's age, The timeline. The resemblance that I'd convinced myself wasn't obvious, but knew deep down, was unmistakable to anyone who looked closely enough. "How old are you?" John asked Ethan directly, his voice carefully neutral. "That's not appropriate," I snapped before Ethan could answer. "Come on, baby, we're leaving." "I'm 10, Ethan said anyway because he was 10 and hadn't learned yet that some questions were traps. "My birthday was last month." The color drained from John's face. His hand reached out like he was going to touch Ethan, then dropped as I shifted to block him completely. "Don't," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare. Elena." My name emerged, choked, disbelieving. "Is he—" "We're leaving." I pulled Ethan away, walking fast enough that he had to skip to keep up. "Mom, who was that man? Why did he look at me like that?" "Nobody," I said, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Just someone who was confused." But I could feel John's eyes on us the entire walk to the subway station, could feel his presence like a physical weight. And when I finally risked a glance back, he was still standing there, frozen on the sidewalk, staring after us with an expression of such raw devastation that for a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. My phone started ringing the moment we got home. John's number. I'd never deleted it from my contacts, even after 10 years of silence, flashed across the screen. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Declined. Again. I finally turned it off and focused on making dinner, helping Ethan with his homework, maintaining the routine that had kept us safe and sane for a decade. But my hands shook as I chopped vegetables, and I burned the rice because I couldn't stop thinking about the look on John's face when he'd realized. When he'd counted back 10 years and 9 months and understood exactly what I'd been hiding. After Ethan went to bed, I stood in my darkened living room and stared at my silent phone. 37 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from John. I shouldn't read them. I knew I shouldn't, but my finger was already opening the messages before I could stop myself. "Elena, please. We need to talk. I need to know if he's mine. Please. Just tell me the truth. I have a right to know. Elena, I'm coming to your apartment. We're settling this tonight." The last message had been sent 15 minutes ago, and it included my address, an address I'd never given him, which meant he'd found me through methods I didn't want to think about. I'd barely processed this when someone knocked on my door. Not a polite knock, a demanding one that made it clear the person on the other side wasn't leaving until I answered. I checked through the peephole and saw John, still in that expensive suit, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 6 hours. "I know you're there," he said, his voice muffled but audible through the door. "Please, Elena, I just want to talk." "Go away," I hissed, hyper-aware that Ethan was sleeping just down the hall. "You can't be here." "I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. The truth is that you gave up any right to answers when you disappeared 10 years ago." I kept my voice low, angry. "You don't get to show up now and demand explanations. Is he mine?" The question was raw, desperate. "Elena, please, just tell me if that boy is my son." The word son in his mouth made my chest constrict with an emotion I couldn't name. Rage. Fear. Something dangerously close to relief that I'd finally have to stop carrying this secret alone. "Why does it matter?" I asked instead of answering. "What difference would it make?" "Every difference." His voice broke. "Elena, if I have a son, if we have a son, then everything changes. Everything." That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Silence stretched between us, heavy with 10 years of unspoken words. "Let me in," John said finally. "Please, let me explain why I left. Let me tell you what I've become and why I stayed away." And then he paused. And then you can decide if you want to tell me the truth about him. Every instinct screamed at me not to open that door. Not to let John Castellano back into my life when I'd spent a decade learning to live without him. Not to risk the fragile stability I'd built for Ethan. But I also knew John well enough to recognize the steel in his voice. He wasn't leaving. And if I didn't let him in willingly, he'd find another way. Methods that might involve the kind of danger I'd been trying desperately to keep away from my son. Our son. I unlocked the door, but kept the chain on, creating just enough gap to see his face clearly. He looked wrecked. Tie hanging loose, hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it, exhaustion and something that looked like hope warring in his dark eyes. "You have 10 minutes," I said. "And you're not coming inside. We talk out here in the hall where you can't wake him." "Him?" John seized on the pronoun. "So it is a boy, and he's 10. Elena." 9 minutes and 45 seconds. He closed his eyes, took a breath that seemed to steady him, then opened them with new focus. Okay. You want to know why I left?" "I wanted to know 10 years ago. I left because my father died." The words emerged flat, factual. "The same night I left you. He was murdered by a rival family, shot outside our house while my mother and sister watched. And with his death, I inherited responsibilities I'd been kept ignorant of my whole life." I stared at him, trying to reconcile this with the boy I'd known. What kind of responsibilities? The kind that involved the Castellano family business. His laugh was bitter. "Which isn't import-export like I was told growing up. It's significantly less legal and significantly more dangerous." The pieces started clicking into place with horrible clarity. The expensive suit, the bodyguards, the casual way he threw around money and talked about enemies. "The Mafia," I breathed. "Among other things." He didn't deny it, which was somehow worse than if he'd tried to lie. "My father kept me separate from it, sent me to public school, let me think I could have a normal life. But when he died, my uncle made it very clear that I had two choices: step up and take my place as heir, or watch my mother and sister be married off to secure alliances with men who would control them, hurt them, use them as pawns. So you chose the Mafia over me." The accusation hung between us. "I chose to keep you safe." His voice was fierce. "Elena, if I'd stayed, if I'd married you like I planned, if I'd built that quiet life we talked about, you would have become a target. Every enemy my family had would have seen you as leverage. They would have hurt you to get to me. And I couldn't." His voice cracked. "I couldn't let that happen. So I left. I let you think I'd abandoned you so you could move on, find someone safe, build the normal life you deserved. You don't get to decide what I deserve." Tears stung my eyes, angry and hot. "You don't get to make that choice for me." "I know. God, Elena, I know. But I was 20 years old. My father was dead. I was being dragged into a world I didn't understand. And all I could think about was keeping you safe from it." He stepped closer to the door, close enough that I could see unshed tears in his own eyes. "I thought about you every single day. I looked you up online obsessively, made sure you were okay from a distance. And when I saw you'd gone to community college, gotten a job, built a life, I told myself I'd made the right choice, that you were better off without me. I was pregnant." The words burst out before I could stop them. "I was pregnant and alone and terrified, and you weren't there. You weren't there when I had to drop out of school. You weren't there when I gave birth. You weren't there for his first words or his first steps or any of the 1,000 moments when I needed you so desperately I thought I'd die from it." John's face crumbled. "Elena, you don't get to cry." I was crying now too. 10 years of repressed grief pouring out. You don't get to feel sorry for yourself when you're the one who left, when you made the choice to walk away. "I know. You're right. But please. He pressed his hand against the door like he could somehow reach through it to touch me. Please tell me about him. Tell me his name. Tell me if he's happy, if he's healthy, if he... His voice broke completely. If he looks like me. He does. The admission felt like surrendering something precious. He has your eyes. Your stubborn cowlick. Your habit of frowning when he concentrates. John made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. What's his name? I shouldn't tell him. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to keep this secret, to protect Ethan from the dangerous world his father inhabited. But looking at John's devastated face, seeing the genuine anguish there, I found I couldn't be that cruel. Ethan, I said softly. His name is Ethan Russo. Ethan. John tested the name like a prayer. Would you let me meet him? Properly, I mean. As his... He stopped, swallowed hard. As his father, I don't know. The honest answer. I don't know if I can risk bringing him into your world, John. You said yourself it's dangerous. I would never let anything happen to him. The words were absolute, a vow. Elena, I've spent 10 years building power, eliminating threats, creating a network that makes me untouchable. If he's my son, if you let me be part of his life, I can protect both of you in ways you can't even imagine. Or we could just stay hidden, safe, away from all of it. You're not as hidden as you think. His voice dropped to something darker. Elena, the moment I found you, others can too. My enemies have been looking for weaknesses, for pressure points. If they discover I have a son, if they realize what he means to me even without meeting him, he becomes a target. Terror, cold and visceral, shot through me. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to protect you, both of you, but I can't do that if you won't let me. He pulled out his phone, showed me the screen. These are the men who've been asking questions about you in the past 3 days. Low-level soldiers from families that would love to hurt me. So far, they haven't made the connection, but it's only a matter of time. The photos showed different men outside the diner, near Ethan's school, on our subway platform. Strangers I'd never noticed, but who had apparently been watching us. Oh, God. My hand flew to my mouth. Let me keep you safe, John said urgently. Both of you. I have resources, Elena. Security, safe houses, money. Anything you need. Just let me do this one thing, right after getting everything else so wrong. I wanted to say no. Wanted to cling to the independence I'd fought so hard for. But looking at those photos, thinking about strange men watching my son, I felt something crack inside me. If I let you into his life, I said slowly, you don't get to leave again. Ever. He's already grown up without a father. I won't let you break his heart the way you broke mine. I won't leave, John promised. Not again. Not even if you beg me to. Then tomorrow, I decided, my voice steadier than I felt. Come to the park at noon, the one 3 blocks east of the school. I'll tell him you're... I paused, trying to figure out how to explain this. I'll tell him you're his father, and we'll see what happens from there. John nodded, something like hope breaking through the devastation on his face. Thank you, Elena. Thank you. I won't let you down. I swear I won't. You already did, I interrupted quietly. Now you get the chance to prove you can do better. I closed the door before he could respond, locked it, and slid down to sit on the floor with my back against the wood, my whole body shaking. Tomorrow, I would introduce Ethan to his father. Tomorrow, everything would change. and I had no idea if I was making the right choice or the worst mistake of my life. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Ethan's doorway watching him dream, memorizing the peaceful innocence on his face, knowing that tomorrow would shatter the simple world I'd worked so hard to build for him. How do you tell a 10-year-old boy that the father he thought was gone forever is actually very much alive? That he didn't leave because he didn't care, but because he was being dragged into a world of violence and power? That meeting him might be the most dangerous and wonderful thing to ever happen? The answer, I discovered, was that you didn't plan it. You just started talking and hoped the right words came out. "Ethan, baby, we need to talk before school." He looked up from his cereal, milk dripping from his spoon, immediately suspicious. Nothing good ever started with, "We need to talk." Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. Nothing like that. I sat down across from him, my coffee untouched, my hands clasped together to keep them from shaking. "Do you remember the man from yesterday? Outside your school?" His face scrunched in concentration. "The one who looked at me weird? You said he was nobody." I lied. The admission felt like swallowing glass. "He's not nobody, he's—" I took a breath. "His name is John, and he's your father." Ethan's spoon clattered into his bowl, splashing milk across the table. "What?" "Your biological father. The man I told you moved away before you were born." The half-truth I'd been living with for a decade. "He didn't move away. He had to leave for complicated reasons, but he's back now, and he wants to meet you." "Why now?" The question was too adult, too sharp. Why not before? Why didn't he ever try to find us? He thought we'd be safer if he stayed away. I reached for his hand, but he pulled back, and the rejection stung more than I'd expected. But things have changed, and now he wants to be part of your life. If you want him to be. "Do you want him to be?" Ethan asked, his dark eyes, John's eyes, boring into mine with uncomfortable perception. Did I? I'd spent 10 years hating John for leaving, building walls around my heart so high that nothing could breach them. But seeing him yesterday, hearing the anguish in his voice, understanding the impossible choice he'd made. "I want you to have a father," I said carefully. "I want you to know where you come from, and I want you to decide for yourself if John Castellano is someone you want in your life." "Castellano?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Like the Castellano Tower downtown? The really tall one with the helicopter pad?" "He's successful," I said, which was technically true, even if his success came from sources I didn't want to examine too closely. "We're meeting him at the park today at noon. You don't have to go if you're not ready." Ethan stared at his cereal for a long moment, and I could see him processing, calculating, trying to understand something that didn't quite make sense in his 10-year-old worldview. "What if he's mean?" he asked finally, his voice small. "What if he doesn't like me?" The vulnerability in his question broke my heart. "Baby, he's going to love you. I know it. But if you're uncomfortable at any point, we leave. Deal?" "Deal." He pushed his cereal away, appetite apparently gone. "Can I wear my good sneakers? The ones with the lights?" And just like that, he was a kid again, worried about making a good impression on the father he'd never met. I wanted to cry and laugh and scream all at once. Wear whatever makes you feel confident. The morning dragged by in agonizing slow motion. I called in sick to the diner, first time in 3 years, and spent the hours alternating between pacing and staring at my phone, half expecting John to cancel, to disappear again, to prove that trusting him had been a mistake. But at 11:30 he texted, "On my way. Thank you for this." I'd chosen the park carefully, public enough to feel safe, but with secluded benches where we could talk without being overheard. Ethan walked beside me in silence, his light-up sneakers flashing with each step, his hands jammed in his pockets. "You okay?" I asked. "Nervous," he admitted. "What if he's disappointed? What if I'm not what he expected?" "Ethan Russo, you are perfect exactly as you are." I stopped, crouched down to his level, despite the curious looks from passing joggers. "Your father is the one who needs to prove himself to you, not the other way around. Remember that." He nodded, but I could see the anxiety in the set of his shoulders as we approached the designated bench. John was already there. He'd ditched the suit for jeans and a dark sweater that made him look younger, more like the boy I'd known. But his posture was rigid, his hands clenched at his sides, and two men in casual clothes stood at a careful distance, close enough to intervene, far enough to provide the illusion of privacy, security. Because of course John Castellano didn't go anywhere without protection. "Is that him?" Ethan whispered. "That's him." John saw us approaching and stood, and I watched him take in every detail of the son he'd never known. The dark hair, the familiar eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw that was pure Castellano determination. "Hi," John said, and his voice cracked on the single syllable. He cleared his throat, tried again. "You must be Ethan." "You must be John." Ethan's voice was steady, but his hand found mine and gripped tight. "I am." John looked at me, asking permission with his eyes, and I nodded slightly. He crouched down, bringing himself to Ethan's eye level. "I know this is strange and probably scary. I know you have questions. I know I have no right to ask for your time or attention. But I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to explain why I wasn't there before, and why I want to be here now." "Mom says you left to keep us safe," Ethan said, his tone skeptical in that way only children could manage. "But that doesn't make sense. Dads are supposed to keep their families safe by staying, not leaving." "You're absolutely right." John's voice was rough with emotion. "And I made the wrong choice. I thought leaving would protect you and your mother from the dangerous world I was being pulled into. But all I did was leave you without a father, and your mother without support. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm sorrier than I can ever express." "What kind of dangerous world?" Ethan asked, because of course he'd zero in on that detail. John glanced at me, silently asking how much to reveal. I shrugged helplessly. We'd have to tell him something eventually. "My family is involved in businesses that aren't always legal," John said carefully, "and some people don't like us because of it. When my father died, I became the head of the family, which meant I had responsibilities and enemies I didn't want anywhere near the people I loved." "Like the Mafia?" Ethan's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and fascination that made my stomach churn. "Something like that," John admitted. "Which is exactly why I stayed away. But now I'm in a position where I can protect you properly, and I've realized that not being part of your life is worse than any danger I was trying to protect you from." Ethan processed this, his expression thoughtful. "Do you kill people?" "Ethan!" I gasped, but John held up a hand. "It's a fair question." He looked at our son with unflinching honesty. "I've made decisions that resulted in people getting hurt. I've defended myself and my family with violence when necessary, but I'm not a monster, Ethan. I'm just a man trying to do right by the people I love, even when the path to right isn't clear." "Can you teach me karate?" Ethan asked suddenly, and the abrupt shift nearly gave me whiplash. John blinked, surprised. Yes, if your mother agrees. Though I'd probably hire you the best instructor in the city rather than teaching you myself." "Cool." Ethan released my hand and took a tentative step closer to John. "Can I ask you something else?" "Anything." "Why do you look so sad when you look at me?" John's breath hitched, and I saw him struggling for composure. "Because I missed so much. Because I should have been there from the beginning, and I wasn't. Because looking at you is like looking at everything I gave up, everything I lost. And because..." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Because you're perfect, and I had nothing to do with it. Your mother did all the hard work, made you into the amazing kid you are, and all I can think about is how much I've missed." Something in Ethan's expression softened. He studied John for another long moment, then asked, "If you could go back, would you stay?" "Every single time," John answered without hesitation. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong. And I'd spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make up for that mistake if you'd let me." Ethan looked at me. "Mom, can we give him a chance?" My throat was too tight for words, so I just nodded. "Okay." Ethan turned back to John, his small face serious. "You can be my dad, but if you leave again, I'll never forgive you, and neither will Mom." "I won't leave." John's voice was fierce, absolute. "Not again, not ever. I promise you both." "Can we get ice cream?" Ethan asked, because he was 10 and his attention span for heavy emotional conversations was limited. "To celebrate?" John laughed, the sound wet and relieved. "We can get whatever you want." As we walked toward the ice cream cart on the far side of the park, Ethan between us, chattering about his favorite flavors, I caught John's eye over our son's head. The gratitude and love in his expression was so raw, so unguarded, that I had to look away before I did something stupid like cry or reach for his hand. This was temporary, I reminded myself. A tentative arrangement that could fall apart at any moment. John's world was dangerous, and we were only just beginning to understand what that meant for us. But watching him listen intently as Ethan explained the complex social dynamics of 5th grade, seeing the gentle way he ruffled our son's hair, I felt something dangerous and unwelcome unfurl in my chest. Hope. We were at the ice cream cart, Ethan deliberating between chocolate and strawberry with the gravity of someone making a life-altering decision, when one of John's security men approached. "Boss, we have a problem." John's entire demeanor changed instantly. The gentle father vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "What kind of problem?" "Marconi family. 3 cars. They've been circling the park for the past 5 minutes." My blood turned to ice. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to leave. Now." John's hand found my elbow, his grip firm but not painful. "Ethan, buddy, change of plans. We're going to get ice cream somewhere else." "Why?" Ethan asked, picking up on the sudden tension. "Because I need to make sure you and your mom are safe." John was already moving us toward the black SUV I'd noticed earlier, his security forming a protective barrier around us. "And right now, this park isn't safe anymore." "Are those your enemies?" Ethan's voice was small, frightened. "The ones you talked about?" "Yes," John answered honestly. "But they're not going to get anywhere near you. I promise." We reached the SUV, and John practically lifted Ethan inside before helping me up. His security moved with practiced efficiency. One driving, one in the passenger seat, both hyper-alert. "Where are we going?" I demanded, as the SUV pulled away from the curb with more speed than was probably legal. "Somewhere they can't follow." John's jaw was tight, his hand reaching for mine almost unconsciously. "Elena, I need you to trust me. You need to tell me what's happening." He glanced at Ethan, who was pressed against my side, eyes wide with fear, then back to me. "The Marconi family is one of our rivals. They've been looking for leverage against me for years. If they saw us together, if they realized you and Ethan are important to me, we become targets," I finished, the full horror of the situation crashing over me. "Not if I can help it." His voice was steel. "I'm taking you somewhere secure, somewhere they'll never find you. And then I'm going to make sure they understand that coming after my family is a death sentence." His family. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they felt like a shield. The somewhere secure turned out to be a penthouse apartment in the Castellano Tower itself. the building Ethan had mentioned that morning with such awe. We rode a private elevator that required a key card and biometric scan, ascending so fast my ears popped. Ethan's hand hadn't left mine since we'd gotten in the car. He'd been silent the entire drive, his usual chatter replaced by a tension that made him seem older than 10. I kept my arm around him, murmuring reassurances I wasn't sure I believed. The elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, and I heard myself gasp despite everything. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, the afternoon sun turning the glass towers into pillars of gold. The space was enormous, easily the size of our entire apartment building, with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum and artwork I recognized from my brief art history class in community college. "There are 3 bedrooms," John said, his voice all business as he ushered us inside. "You and Ethan can take the master suite. It has a bathroom the size of your living room and locks that would stop a tank." "This is your home?" I asked, trying to process the sheer wealth on display. "One of them." He moved to a panel on the wall, pressing buttons that made steel shutters begin descending over the windows. "I have places in 6 cities, but this is headquarters. Safest location in the state. We have security on every floor, armed guards in the lobby, and surveillance that would make the FBI jealous." "Cool," Ethan breathed, his fear temporarily eclipsed by the sheer novelty of everything. "Is that a real Monet?" "Original, yes." John crouched down to Ethan's level again, his expression softening. "I know this is scary, buddy, but you're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you or your mother, okay?" "Okay." Ethan's voice was small. "Can I explore?" "Of course. Just stay inside the apartment." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He took off toward what looked like a game room, leaving John and me alone for the first time since the park. "How bad is this?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Bad enough that I'm calling in every favor I'm owed." John moved to a laptop on the coffee table, his fingers flying across the keys. "The Marconis seeing us together accelerates everything. They'll start asking questions, making connections. By tonight, every family in the city will know I have a son. And that's dangerous because children are leverage." His voice was flat, factual, terrifying in its calm delivery. "In our world, you hurt your enemies by hurting what they love. I've made a lot of enemies, Elena, and now they have a target. The reality of what I'd agreed to crashed over me like ice water. We should leave the city, change our names, disappear. They'd find you." He looked up from the screen, his eyes intense. "Elena, you need to understand something. These aren't street thugs. These are organizations with international reach, with resources that rival most governments. If they want to find you, they will. The only way to keep you safe is to make it clear that touching you means war. So what's the plan?" "I'm arranging a meeting with the heads of the 5 families." His jaw tightened. "I'm going to make a formal announcement that you and Ethan are under Castellano protection. That any threat to you is a declaration of war against me. And that I'm prepared to burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you." The fierce certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it kindled something warm and dangerous in my chest. This was the boy I'd loved, the one who'd promised to protect me from anything, grown into a man with the power to actually do it. "When?" I asked. "Tonight." He closed the laptop. "Which means you and Ethan stay here until I get back. There's food in the kitchen, entertainment systems in every room, and Marco—" He gestured to one of the security men who'd followed us up. "Will be stationed outside the elevator. If anything feels wrong, if anything scares you, you hit this button." He showed me a panic button disguised as a light switch. "It alerts my personal security team and locks down the entire building." "You've thought of everything." "I've had 10 years to plan for this moment." His hand found my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. 10 years of imagining what I'd do if I ever got you back. Keeping you safe is all that matters, Elena. You and Ethan. Nothing else. Don't say things like that. My voice came out shakier than I wanted. Don't make promises you might not be able to keep. I'm not making promises. His forehead rested against mine, his breath warm on my lips. I'm stating facts. You're mine. You've always been mine. And I protect what's mine with everything I have. I'm not yours, I whispered. But the protest was weak, undermined by the way my body leaned into his touch, by the 10 years of longing I'd tried so hard to bury. Aren't you? His voice dropped lower, intimate. Your heart is racing right now. You haven't stopped looking at me since we got in the elevator. And when I touch you, his thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. You remember. You remember us. What we were. What we could be again. That was a lifetime ago. We're different people now. Some things don't change. His lips brushed mine, barely a kiss, just a promise. I loved you then, Elena. I love you now. And I'll love you every day for the rest of my life, whether you admit you still love me or not. I started, but the lie stuck in my throat. Mom? Ethan's voice broke the moment, and we sprang apart like guilty teenagers. There's a whole room full of video games. Can I play them? Of course, John answered before I could. Everything here is yours, both of you. Make yourselves at home. After Ethan disappeared again, I put distance between myself and John, needing space to think clearly. We need to talk about what happens after tonight. What do you mean? I mean, Ethan can't grow up in this world. He can't have armed guards following him to school. He can't spend his childhood being a target. He won't be a target if I eliminate the threats. John's voice went cold. The Marconis made a move today. That was a mistake. By tomorrow morning, they'll understand exactly what happens to people who threaten my family. You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about protecting my son. No apology, no justification, just flat certainty. Elena, I know you want to keep him innocent. I know you've built a normal life for him. But that life ended the moment I walked back into yours. He's a Castellano now, whether we like it or not. The only question is whether he's a protected Castellano or a vulnerable one. The brutal honesty made my head spin. There has to be another way. If there is, I haven't found it in 10 years of looking. He moved to the window, staring out at the city he apparently ruled. I can give him everything, Elena. The best schools, the best security, opportunities you couldn't dream of. But I can't give him normalcy. That option disappeared the moment his last name became Castellano. His last name is Russo. For now. John turned, his expression implacable. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to be a family, he needs my name and all the protection that comes with it. Legal protection, political protection, protection from the kind of men who'd use a 10-year-old boy to settle scores. You're asking me to give up everything I've built for him. I'm asking you to let me keep him safe. John crossed back to me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Elena, I know you've been strong for so long. I know you've done everything on your own. But you don't have to anymore. Let me help. Let me be the father he deserves. Let me give you both the life you should have had. Tears burned in my eyes, angry and hot. You don't understand. I've spent 10 years proving I don't need you, that I could survive without you, that loving you was a mistake I'd never make again. And were you right? His voice was soft, almost gentle. Did you stop needing me? Did you survive? Or did you just exist? And was loving me really a mistake? Or was it the most real thing that ever happened to both of us? I wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him I'd been perfectly happy without him. That these 10 years had been full and complete. But standing in his apartment, feeling his hands warm on my shoulders, seeing the desperate hope in his eyes. I couldn't manage it. "I hate that you left," I whispered instead. "I hate that you made that choice for both of us. I hate that you took away my ability to decide if I wanted to face danger with you or without you." "I know. And I hate that part of me, a part I've tried so hard to kill, is glad you're back." Something fierce and triumphant flashed across his face. "Elena? But that doesn't mean I trust you." I stepped back, breaking contact. "That doesn't mean I forgive you, and it definitely doesn't mean we're just picking up where we left off. You want to be Ethan's father? Prove it. You want to keep us safe? Do it. But don't expect me to fall into your arms like I'm still that 19-year-old girl who believed in fairy tales. I don't expect that." His voice was rough. "I just expect a chance. That's all I'm asking for." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened. "The meeting is set. 9 o'clock tonight at the Regency Club. Every family head will be there. And you're going to tell them about Ethan. I'm going to make it clear that anyone who threatens him answers to me." He typed something quickly, then pocketed the phone. "Stay here. Keep Ethan entertained. Marco has my number if anything goes wrong. I'll be back by midnight. John." I caught his arm as he moved toward the elevator. "Be careful." Something soft entered his expression. "Worried about me? Worried about what happens to Ethan if you get yourself killed playing Mafia boss. I've been playing this role for 10 years, Elena. I'm very good at not dying." He pressed a kiss to my forehead, quick and possessive. "I'll come back. I always come back to you." Then he was gone, the elevator doors closing on his determined expression, leaving me alone in a gilded fortress with our son and a panic button that suddenly seemed far too small a defense against the world John inhabited. I found Ethan in the game room, controller in hand, his earlier fear apparently forgotten in the face of unlimited video game access. "This place is amazing," he said without looking away from the screen. "Is John really rich?" "Very rich. Because of the Mafia stuff?" I settled onto the couch beside him, trying to figure out how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. "Because of his family's business, which is complicated and not always legal." "Ethan, I need you to understand something. This world, John's world, it's dangerous. There are people who might want to hurt us just because we're connected to him." "I know." He paused his game, finally looking at me. "I heard you guys talking about enemies and protection and stuff. And that doesn't scare you?" "It's scary," he admitted, "but also kind of cool. Like, I have a dad now, and he's powerful and wants to protect us. That's better than not having a dad at all, right?" The simple logic of a 10-year-old. I pulled him close, breathing in his familiar scent, praying I'd made the right choice. "Right," I agreed. "But promise me something. If anything ever feels wrong, if anyone ever makes you uncomfortable or scared, you tell me immediately, okay?" "Okay, Mom." He hugged me back, then pulled away to resume his game. "Can we stay here tonight? This place is way cooler than our apartment." I looked around at the luxury we'd been thrust into, at the life John was offering, at the danger that came packaged with protection. "Yeah, baby," I said softly. "We can stay tonight." And tried not to think about how quickly tonight might become forever. John didn't return at midnight. I paced the penthouse, checking my phone every 30 seconds, my imagination conjuring increasingly horrific scenarios. The meeting had gone wrong. Someone had betrayed him. He was lying bleeding in some alley, alone and dying, just like his father. At 1 a.m, Marco knocked softly on the door. "Mrs. Russo?" "Boss wanted me to tell you the meeting ran long. He's fine, but it's complicated." "What kind of complicated?" Marco's expression was carefully neutral. the kind that requires the boss's personal attention. He said to tell you he loves you, and he'll explain everything when he gets back. He loves you. The words shouldn't have affected me, but they burrowed under my skin, warm and dangerous. I forced myself to try to sleep, curling up in the massive master bedroom beside Ethan, who'd refused to sleep alone in the unfamiliar space. But every sound made me jolt awake, heart racing, until finally, at 3 a.m, I heard the elevator chime. I was out of bed and in the living room before I could stop myself. John stood in the doorway, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt streaked with something dark that might have been blood. His tie hung loose around his neck, and there was a cut above his eyebrow that had been hastily bandaged. "You're hurt," I said, crossing to him before I could think better of it. "It's nothing." His voice was exhausted. "The other guy looks worse." "What happened?" He sank onto the couch like his legs could no longer hold him. "The Marconis tried to play hardball during the meeting. Suggested that maybe my son wasn't as valuable as I thought, that accidents happen to children all the time." His hands clenched into fists. "I made it very clear that any accident involving Ethan would result in the complete annihilation of their family line. You threatened them." "I promised them." He looked up at me, and his eyes were cold, empty of anything except lethal certainty. And then Marco Marconi made the mistake of laughing, so I broke his jaw. I should have been horrified, should have grabbed Ethan and run as far from this violence as possible. But instead, I found myself touching the bandage above his eye, checking for more damage. "You're bleeding." One of his sons took exception to his father choking on his own teeth. A ghost of a smile. "He won't make that mistake again." "John, I handled it, Elena." His hand caught mine, pressing it against his chest where I could feel his heart racing. "I made it clear to every family in this city that you and Ethan are untouchable, that coming after you means war with the Castellanos, and that I will personally kill anyone who even looks at my son wrong. You can't just declare war every time someone threatens us." "Watch me." His voice was absolute. "Elena, I let you go once to keep you safe. I spent 10 years in hell without you. I'm not making that mistake again. Anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me. And I promise you..." His eyes were fierce, feral. "No one gets through me." The possessiveness should have scared me. Instead, it ignited something I'd been trying to suppress since the moment he'd walked back into my life. "You're insane," I whispered. "Completely." He pulled me down onto his lap, his arms wrapping around me with desperate strength. "Insane for you. For Ethan. For this family I thought I'd lost forever. We're not a family. We're a mess. We're both." His lips found my neck, my jaw, the corner of my mouth. A beautiful, complicated, dangerous mess. But we're together. That's all that matters. I should have pushed him away, should have maintained the boundaries I'd tried so hard to establish. But his touch awakened something I'd thought was dead, the part of me that had loved him with reckless, consuming intensity, the part that had never stopped. "I hate you," I breathed as his mouth claimed mine. "I know." He kissed me deeper, harder. "Hate me all you want as long as you stay." "I hate that I still love you." He froze, pulled back to look at me with eyes suddenly vulnerable. "Say that again." "I hate..." The second part. I could still deny it, could claim it was exhaustion or fear or temporary insanity. But looking at this man who'd walked away to protect me, who'd spent 10 years in a world of violence and power, who'd broken someone's jaw for threatening our son, I couldn't lie anymore. "I love you," I whispered. "I never stopped, and I hate myself for it." "Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't hate yourself for that. It's the only thing that's kept me alive these past 10 years. The hope that maybe, somehow, you still loved me, that I hadn't completely destroyed what we had. You did destroy it, I said, tears streaming down my face. And I had to rebuild myself from nothing. I had to learn to be strong without you, to survive without you, to raise our son and work 2 jobs and never let myself think about what we could have been. I know. God, Elena, I know. And I'd do anything to take that pain away. But I can't. All I can do is promise that it's over now. The surviving alone, the struggling, the fear. You're mine now, both of you. And I take care of what's mine. You keep saying that. I touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. That I'm yours. But what if I need you to be mine too? What if I need to know that you won't leave again? That you won't disappear into your dangerous world and forget about us? Never. The word was a vow. Elena, you and Ethan are my world now. Everything else, the business, the power, the money, it's all just a means to keep you safe. I'd walk away from it all tomorrow if that's what you needed. Would you? I challenged. Could you really leave the Castellano Empire behind? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he admitted finally. Because leaving means abandoning the protection that keeps you safe, the network that makes sure no one touches you, the fear that makes men think twice before threatening my family. I can't walk away from that. But I swear to you, Elena, I'll never let it consume me. You come first. Ethan comes first. Always. The honesty was more reassuring than any promise. Then we do this together. You don't make decisions for us anymore. You don't decide what's safe or what's too dangerous. We're partners, or we're nothing. Partners, he agreed. In everything. I kissed him then, pouring 10 years of longing and anger and love into it. He responded with matching intensity, his hands tangling in my hair, his mouth claiming mine like he'd never let go. We might have gone further if a small voice hadn't interrupted from the hallway. Are you guys kissing? We sprang apart to find Ethan standing in his pajamas, sleepy-eyed and confused. I couldn't sleep, he explained, and I heard voices. Are you fighting? No, baby. I moved off John's lap, suddenly self-conscious. We're just talking. It looked like kissing. He patted closer, his shrewd eyes moving between us. Are you guys going to be together? Like, for real? I glanced at John, who was watching our son with an expression of such fierce love it made my heart ache. Would that be okay with you? John asked. If your mom and I tried to make this work, if we became a real family? Ethan considered this with the gravity of a much older person. Will you promise not to leave again? I promise. On my life, Ethan, I will never leave you or your mother again. And will you teach me cool stuff? Like how to defend myself and how to be strong like you? I'll teach you everything I know. John's voice was rough with emotion, including how to protect the people you love, how to be honorable even in a world that doesn't always reward honor, how to be a good man even when being powerful is easier. Okay then. Ethan crossed to John and held out his hand for a shake. You can be my dad for real, but if you make Mom cry, I'll be mad at you forever. John took his hand solemnly, shaking it like they were sealing a business deal. That's fair. Your mom is the most important person in the world to me. Making her happy is my #1 priority. Good. Ethan yawned, already losing interest in the adult drama. Can I sleep in your bed, Mom? The other room is too big. Of course, baby. I tucked him back into the master suite, staying until his breathing evened out into sleep. When I returned to the living room, John was standing at the windows, watching the city wake up as dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Thank you, he said without turning, for giving me another chance, for letting me meet him, for not hating me as much as I deserve. Oh, I still hate you. I moved to stand beside him, I hate you for leaving. I hate you for making me love you again. I hate you for being so absolutely certain about everything when I'm terrified all the time. What are you terrified of? That this won't last. That something will happen to you and I'll lose you again. That Ethan will get hurt because of who his father is. That I'll wake up one day and this will all have been a dream. I turned to face him. That I'm making a mistake trusting you with our hearts. You're not. He pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me like he could shield me from every fear. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, Elena. I can't promise there won't be danger or complications or hard times. But I promise I'll face all of it with you. No more running, no more leaving. Whatever comes, we handle it together. Together, I echoed, and the word felt like a promise. We stood like that as the sun rose over the city, two broken people who'd found their way back to each other, and the sun who'd given them a reason to try. 3 months later, I stood in the same penthouse wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of white roses. Ethan stood beside John, looking impossibly grown up in his small tuxedo, ready to serve as his father's best man. Father Michael from the church near our old apartment performed the ceremony, his voice warm as he talked about second chances and unexpected blessings. Only a handful of people attended. John's closest associates, a few family members I was still getting to know, and Mrs. Chen, who cried through the entire ceremony. Do you, Elena Russo, take this man to be your husband? To stand beside him through danger and triumph, through fear and certainty, for all the days of your lives? I looked at John, this dangerous, complicated, infuriating man who'd loved me enough to leave and loved me enough to come back. Who'd broken someone's jaw for threatening our son, who'd built an empire, but would burn it all down to keep us safe. I do. And do you, John Castellano, take this woman to be your wife? To protect her? To cherish her? To build a life with her worthy of the second chance she's giving you? I do. His voice was rough with emotion. I absolutely do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. John, you may kiss your bride. He did, thoroughly and possessively, in front of everyone, and I heard Ethan make a disgusted sound that made the small crowd laugh. That's my mom you're kissing, our son announced. You have to be respectful. You're absolutely right, John said, releasing me just enough to pull Ethan into our embrace. How about I kiss both of you? He planted exaggerated kisses on both our foreheads, while Ethan squirmed and protested, and secretly loved every second. And looking at my husband, and our son, I felt something settle in my chest that had been restless for a decade. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but people. Not safety, but love fierce enough to face any danger. Not the life I'd planned, but the life I'd been meant for all along. I love you, I whispered to John as we swayed together during our first dance, Ethan watching from the sidelines with undisguised glee. I love you more, he countered. I loved you first, I loved you longest, and I'll love you forever. That's not how competition works. With us, everything is a competition. His smile was warm, genuine, nothing like the cold masks he wore for his business. But this is one competition where we both win. He was right. Against all odds, despite every mistake and misunderstanding and lost year, we'd found our way back to each other. And this time, I wasn't the terrified 19-year-old who didn't know how to fight for what she wanted. I was Elena Castellano now, mother, wife, partner to one of the most dangerous men in the city. And I'd chosen this life with my eyes wide open, knowing the risks, accepting the complications, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Always together.